Hallo ihr Lieben, wir machen weiter mit perfect. We're going to continue talking about perfect, the perfect tense. Specifically today we're going to expand into irregular verbs, and we're also going to finish up the negation part, which we didn't get to earlier in the day. So I'm going to do negation and irregular verbs today. Also, I wanted to point out that on Quizlet, I specifically added a list of just past participles. Right now, sorry about that. Right now, it's just the regular verb past participles. And you guys should be studying that. I'm going to be quizzing you on Thursday on past participles. So you will have a quiz on these coming up very, very soon. In case you haven't noticed, I don't know if you guys looked at this chapter, there is actual content vocab coming up, and we will start practicing that, but there is a ton of vocab, specifically because you have all these past participles, and they are kind of like learning separate vocab at this point. So, if you don't do this already, make sure that you're studying every single day for 5 to 10 minutes, just your vocab. I'm going to start making Quizlet mandatory at least twice a week, but I will talk to you guys about that separately. So just if you've already started with that, that's awesome. You're ahead of the game. If not, do start it, and I will talk to you guys about it very soon. Okay. I had on the board a couple of sentences earlier. I'm going to write them again, and it was, ich habe meine Hausaufgaben gemacht. So if we had the sentence in present tense, it would read, ich mache meine Hausaufgaben. I'm just going to shorten that. So, ich mache meine Hausaufgaben. If you were to negate that sentence in the present tense, you would literally just add a nicht to the very end of the sentence. That comes after the direct object is the actual rule when you have negation in this case. So negation, when you're negating an entire statement, or if you're negating specifically a direct object, it's going to follow that direct object. So that looks like at the very end of the sentence. If you then have it in the perfect tense in the past, it still goes in that same spot. It would go right there because it's going to go right behind that direct object. So it has to go before the past participle. This past participle has to stand at the end of the sentence. The second sentence I had was, ich habe am Wochenende gearbeitet. Or in present tense, ich arbeite am, I'm going to abbreviate again, Wochenende. So in this case, we have a loose period of time. So it's a time phrase, but it's a non-specific is what we call this. So the same thing applies. You would have nicht at the end. And again, the same rule applies. Nicht has to go before the past participle. So that was just two examples that I wanted to go over really, really quick with you guys before doing a textbook activity. I'm going to have you guys actually do the textbook activity in pairs. So I need you to find the person sitting next to you. You guys are looking at the textbook on page 202, and you guys are going to be doing exercise 6.13 or 6-13. Warum hast du das nicht gemacht? So this is what it looks like. Warum hast du das nicht gemacht? I do want to hear only German. I want you guys speaking and practicing that. You guys are getting to goof off quite a bit because we have that second section in here, so I'm distracted a lot, but it is really important that you guys actually use the time that I give you to practice speaking German and practice your skills rather than just socializing. When you're looking at this activity, this is what it will look like each time. You have a little image and a little prompt underneath that image. For these ones, you have an image, but the prompt is down here at the bottom. The way it works is the two go together, and you have to figure out what these people are doing. So this one, of course, is already given to you. Deinen Koffer packen and mit Monika telefonieren. The first person, so this prompt is going to ask, why didn't you do that? So, warum hast du deinen Koffer nicht gepackt? So you're taking this verb, making that into a past participle, and putting your helper verb in second place. The second person then answers with a weil clause. So it's just that second clause of the sentence. And you're just answering with an excuse based on the image. Weil ich mit Monika telefoniert habe. So if you remember, weil is our boot, right? It kicks the conjugated verb to the end. So that's why your helper verb is right there in the very last place. And telefoniert is your past participle. Do you remember why telefoniert doesn't have a GE? Okay. So you guys are going to go through, there's a total of 6 questions, so there's 6 conversations back and forth. What I want you to do with your partner is have one person ask for the first set and then have another person ask for the second set. And just go back and forth. There is a word that they're prompting you on, and that is Rasen, and that means lawn. So clearly that is that picture. Okay, when you finish, please keep going with the video. Until then, pause it. Okay, we're going to keep going with those irregular verbs. Now, the irregular verbs in the perfect specifically are relatively few. It's a relatively small group, and they often have a stem change. Not always, but a lot of the time. And they always end up ending in en. So that marks one of your irregular verbs, and that's of course for the past participle. So you're going to have a stem change, and rather than ending in T, they're going to end in en. So one example of that is you have finden, which means to find. Now finden, if I had a sentence, would be ich habe den Stift gefunden. So when you're looking at gefunden, here's your past participle. The structure, of course, is exactly the same. The structure of the sentence is the same. I still have my verb in second place. There's my helper verb. My past participle is at the very end. But gefunden is GE plus a changed stem. So I, in this case, have fund. And then I have an en ending on that. So gefunden. Another example would be nehmen, and this one is a little easier. Nehmen again means to take, and if you remember, in the present tense, this also had a stem change. So that is a huge tip-off for you. So this was a stem changing verb in the present. In the past tense, it becomes ich habe genommen. So again, we have our GE, we have a new stem that is NOMM, and then there's the en ending on it. Another example that we have would be schlafen, which means to sleep, not schlaufen, schlafen, there's no U. And again, this was a stem changing one, so it became schläft in the present tense. In the past tense, it becomes habe geschlafen. Now notice, this one, the stem stayed the same, right? There's no change there. You have the GE plus schlaf, and then you have an en ending on it. So ich habe geschlafen, but it's still considered irregular because of that en. Okay, I'm going to give you a whole list of these, and I do want you guys to write every single one of these down in your notes. I do not want you to just take a picture. I need you to actually write them down in your notebook. So here's the list. I'm going to go through them one by one for pronunciation, and I'd like you guys to please follow along and say them out loud. We have gebacken, gegessen, gefunden, gegossen, gelesen, gelegen, genommen, geschlafen, geschnitten, geschrieben, gesehen, gesungen, gesessen, gesprochen, gestanden, gestrichen, getrunken, and gewaschen. So when you're writing these down, I want you to write the present tense, or the infinitive, the past participle, and I also want you guys to include what the word actually means in English. So you're adding a third little column. These are the past participles for the irregular ones for now that you're responsible for. This list will grow, but you guys need to start studying these very soon. Again, our quiz tomorrow is just on the regular ones, but start looking at these ones as well. If you're not done, please pause the video now. All right, just for some practice, you guys are going to do an activity in the workbook in order to practice these verb forms. What I want you guys to do is I want you to look at page 179, 180, and you're doing exercise A6-2. Every single one of the verbs that they're using in this activity is irregular. So in each section, you have to figure out which one you have to use. So this one and this one is already used. So we have gelegen. They have a sentence or a question written for you, and they're missing the verbs. So in this case, we had to add the helper verb. In this case, it was a yes or no question, so it was at the very front, and the past participle at the end. The same is true for the next one. You have weißt du, you have to add a past participle, and you have to add a helper verb. Now, when we have weißt du, wer, diesen Artikel, this wer, you guys learned in the previous chapter, boots are conjugated verb. So the helper verb in this case will end up at the very end of the sentence. And when we're doing an article, we have schreiben or backen. Which one do you guys think is the right verb to use? Hopefully you guys figured out that schreiben is the verb. This means to write. So we're gonna stick our wer back there. That's the word we're using as a conjunction. So we have, do you know who wrote this article is what we want to say. So wer diesen Artikel. Then we're going to use the past participle for this one with a change in the stem. So geschrieben. And then I need my helper verb at the very end because I was booting. So you got to pay attention to the rest of the structures. This one, for example, is just regular sentence structure. There's no boots, no nothing. So for the next one, you guys should have this down without any trouble. Okay, it goes on to the second page. Make sure you do all of them. This is due at the very end of class. I'm going to have my aide look over them to make sure you guys finished. Make sure that you bring the textbook back and you bring the workbook back and put it on the back shelf for me.